Another Western Conference matchup for the DNVR Avalanche playoff series previews. This one, the other teams in the West, in the Central. Dallas and Minnesota.
So blah.
It is a two blah hockey teams.
Knowing that if the Avs win their series, that they will take the winner of this series, I am weirdly just not invested.
A lot of drab green in this series.
Yeah, I'm glad that the Avs will be playing
whatever color Seattle is.
I'm glad that the Avs will be playing on a different day, so that I have an excuse to ignore that series.
Just not pay any attention.
I will be watching the Nuggets during those games.
Look, Dallas was the team that led the Central Division for the vast majority of this season. You could make an argument that they're a quality team because of that. You could also make an argument that they've got problems because they gave that 1 seed away at the end of the year.
Look, Dallas, I feel like, has been the same thing for like 4 or 5 years now, where this team is capable of rattling off 10 straight and then they can lose 7 of 8 just as quickly. The only thing that changed that this year is Jake Oettinger. It limited the losing
disasters.
streaks.
Sure. An important thing.
Helpful.
Difference between almost winning a division, LOL suckers, and
barely squeaking in.
Being the 8th seed. I guess the 7th seed is what they were last year.
And make no mistake about it, in the regular season, Dallas was absolutely an overtime merchant team. You can see 14 overtime losses.
Yeah.
Some of that is games they should have won. Some of that is games they should have lost.
A lot of them are games they should have lost.
Yeah.
I can think of 2 off the top of my head that they had no business being in overtime in, where they got the benefit of officiating in the last 10 seconds of regulation that got them extra points. So I'm glad I don't have to talk about it and be mad about those things because they didn't win the division. But my overall point here is more that they just had kind of a charmed season. They had no major injury issues. They had no major adversity. They were good at the start of the year. They were good in the middle of the year, and they were good late in the year. They were just a good hockey team that sat at the top of a division that was kind of in its own way most of the season. And I think that masked the fact that they were a good team and not a great team. And that they are pretty appropriately seated right now.
I'm going to ask a question that I probably have to qualify. Megan, who's the most important player on this hockey? Not X Factor. Is it Jason Robertson or is it a Jamie Benn? Is it Miro Heiskanen? Is it a Jake Oettinger?
Based on last year, it is Jake Oettinger.
Okay.
Like, just assuming that's what, they need moving forward. However, with Jason Robertson having the year that he's having, he's right there alongside him. But I think that the outcome of this series hinges heavily on Jake Oettinger. And the thing is, I think he's qualified too. I don't have any doubt that he's not going to show up. I just think that's going to affect the series in a big way.
Was it almost impossible for Jake Oettinger to live up to what he did against Calgary last year? Like, he set the bar so astronomically high that if he goes into this series and has like a .913 save percentage and they win in 6 games, it almost feels like a letdown just because he was so dominant last year against a Flames team that was much, much better than the Stars.
This series is actually one, for reasons that we'll get into when we move over to Minnesota, that I think you need average from Jake Oettinger. But I agree with Megan that if Dallas has any hope of going any deeper than that, like, you're going to need... I just think you're going to need a pretty special effort from Jake Oettinger, because this team is good. Like, they have good players. Mm-hmm. Jason Robertson's had a fantastic year. Jamie Benn, huge bounce back season. Joe Pavelski continues to defy time. But like we said, Miro Heiskanen's great defenseman. Like we said, this team just disappears. They just go away for chunks at a time. And as we saw last year, Jake Oettinger papered over a lot of that. In this particular series, I don't think he needs to be spectacular, and that's more saying something about what I think about Minnesota than it is Dallas. But for them to go deep, I'm with Megan. Jake Oettinger is absolutely the most important player on this team.
Well, I have completely forgotten who I made the X factor for Dallas.
Sick.
So I will find out. Oh, that's right. Their acquisition at the trade deadline.
So Max Domi comes in and he's supposed to help boost a second line that was already really good.
Not done
With
that.
Jamie
really.
Benn and Wyatt
Yeah.
Johnston and Tyler Seguin, and Max Domi's having the 1C year that he had in Chicago. He goes in. Max Domi finishes with the same production at the end of the year after the acquisition as Lars Eller. So all the hand wringing over the price and acquisition costs and all this, and as Max Domi gets to Dallas, same thing that he did last year. He goes to Carolina. They ask him to be a depth guy because he's not a leading man on an NHL team, and he struggles. He struggles to be that guy. And when you get into the depth, Dallas is going to need depth because Minnesota is so good defensively that they might be able to take away Jamie Benn or Jason Robertson or Rupe Hintz, some of these guys at the top. Max Domi being that guy, they just need better from him in all phases of the game. They need better from him.
Yep.
As an important depth guy, as a bridge between their top six and bottom six, because Roddick Fox is not it. As great as he is defensively, we've seen that guy just doesn't have the offensive punch to matter. And Max Domi's supposed to be that bridge there. He hadn't done any of that since he got to Dallas.
It's just how many teams have we seen get to the playoffs that have a really good top six and just kind of have some stuff elsewhere?
Most of them. That's how you get into the postseason.
But the teams that don't have the extra are the teams that get eliminated.
Yep, those are the teams that go home quickly because you've got to be able to play. So with Max Domi, I think he would be an important X factor for this series.
So we talked so much about with last year's Avs team is just their depth chewed teams up. It's because you ran into teams like this where, a Max Domi type, the way that he hasn't really shown up since he got to Dallas. The Avs bottom six last year, and again, it's not just the Avs; it's a lot of Stanley Cup champions. That was how Tampa Bay was a hallmark of how they won there too.
Pat Maroon just keeps signing contracts there because he gets to score 5 goals every playoff run.
Right, and it's one of those things that it seems insignificant when you talk about guys like Jason Robertson, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, that you say you need Max Domi, but that's why.
Yeah.
You get deep enough in the playoffs, everyone's top
right.
six is good.
We've talked about Edmonton, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman, the Avs, obviously with McKinnon, Rantanen, Nichushkin, Lehkonen, even someone like Erod.
This series, though, each team has one elite player at the top of their forward core. You have Kirill Kaprizov going against Jason Robertson.
Yep.
You have true blue elite talent at the top of those lineups. And you got good players around them. So you go down the line, you're canceling everything out. You're saying, okay, you're getting deeper into the lineup. The lack of Eriksson Ek in Minnesota is a concern. But that's where Max Domi elevates his importance.
Well, and Minnesota's side of this is in a very strange place, right? Where Minnesota, they've gotten into the playoffs, they've made a good run of it. They're a team with obvious cap situation weirdness going on, dealing with the buyouts that they've made in the past. It doesn't feel like they're all the way there to being a contender.
This is one of the most confusing teams for me of maybe the last 3 to 4 years. Like going back to the COVID shortened year, this is one of the most puzzling teams to me because they made the huge buyouts really that I'm still confused by because it really didn't help you out money-wise outside of like immediately in that 56 game season. So it was like, okay, are you going to try to just go for it in this 56 game season and then see what happens? Kirill Kaprizov shows up, just a total shot of life into the arm of that organization. But I'm with you. I think there are very obvious shortcomings all over the roster.
When the whole roster isn't having a career year, yeah.
Right. And I just, they have still the worst years of the dead cap ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just so puzzled by this team because I don't think they're good enough, even if they were to get out of this round. I don't think they're good enough to go deep. and they're obviously way too good to be getting anywhere near valuable picks.
Just look, the top scorers, it's Edmonton, but worse in every way. Instead of having 150-point guys at the top, they have a 75-point guy, and the drop-off is still there, where their fifth dude doesn't even have 40 points.
Right.
It's tough because Kaprizov missed a bit of time. I think that
number would be higher.
But this is where you see that they miss Kevin Fiala, and they're going to likely miss Greenway because this isn't posing quite the same threat in their forward group as Dallas's might. But the defense is going to be an interesting strength. Kalen Addison is going to be an interesting strength for Minnesota. I go back to goaltending and how it started this year for Minnesota as a huge problem. It is leveled out by the end of this season, and I think that Fleury is a veteran goaltender that I don't necessarily have concerns that this completely goes back to square one like it was at the start of this year, but that is going to be where these teams kind of level each other out. I think you guys have mentioned that in a lot of ways, and it's going to be which piece separates between the two. Like the great goaltending that Dallas is getting, Minnesota has great defense. It's going to be interesting to see who emerges then as the player that separates these two teams from one another.
Here's my issue with Minnesota. You mentioned Marc-Andre Fleury. He's probably not even starting.
No,
it's Philip Gustafsson.
Right.
And this is, and I will die on this hill, you cannot go into the post because again they're going to go with Philip Gustafsson, but Russo's reporting this morning they picked their starter. They're not saying who. Every time there's a bad goal that goes in, the camera's going to cut right to the guy sitting on the bench. And the minute things start to go bad or they get behind in the series by 2, you start flip flopping and you're dead.
And this is post that one run he had in Vegas. This has been Fleury's lot in life. He's the goalie that he'll always get a game in the playoffs. It'll come down to it, and that coach will pull the trigger and put Fleury in for a game, and you're just in shambles back there.
The real hallmark of his career, and this is mean because he's just overall good dude. He's the guy that loses the job. He usually finishes the playoffs on the bench watching his team lose because they've gotten to that situation.
Well,
outside of the run to Vegas and his Stanley Cup championship in 2009, that is almost every playoff team Marc-Andre Fleury has been a part of.
When he's losing the job, the teams actually win, though.
Right.
As opposed to him taking over the job.
True, yeah. It's just, we were having this argument the other day at the arena. Tandem goaltenders, it's proven to be a really solid system to pick up a lot of regular season wins. Nobody has been able to pull that off successfully in the playoffs. And I just look, when you have question marks about who is your starter, they've both been good. I don't think Philip Gustafsson is a .930 goaltender. Not in reality.
The X factor here might be AJ's favorite player on planet Earth.
I mean, Kirill Kaprizov gets hurt. Matt Boldy
goes
crazy.
Step up. Yeah.
He goes crazy. Kaprizov's back. They need Boldy's level to stay there.
Because of Eriksson Ek.
With no Eriksson Ek down the middle, they're already not great center depth. Takes a hit that they probably can't survive, to be honest with you. Having really good wings like Matt Boldy and Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Zuccarello.
It's really hard to win games from the wing.
Marcus Johansson, Gustav Nyquist is healthy now. You're talking about Oscar Sundqvist was brought in, like a lot of really good wings. Now you're back to Frederick Gaudreau and Ryan Hartman down the middle. Like you just don't have the goods at that point.
Yep.
I like everything about Minnesota's roster. I'm even willing to buy into the idea that Gustafsson might be for real. He should get the chance to prove it.
Sure.
But when you're talking about this head-to-head matchup, Dallas has a potentially elite player at all 3 levels. You have Jason Robertson, you have Miro Heiskanen, and you have Jake Oettinger.
Yep.
Those are guys who are all top 10 players at their positions in the NHL. And Minnesota just doesn't have that. They've got Kirill Kaprizov. They've got a really good young player in Matt Boldy whose ascent we'll see. I mean, we'll see how much with Kaprizov back that can continue. But it's just incredibly difficult to succeed in the postseason without centers. And that's just their biggest weakness right now. They are very, very good defensively, which has helped them create an environment for a guy like Gustafsson to break out. they do have an elite player that can solve some of your scoring problems in Kaprizov, and a guy that can just go out and do special things and just make a play. They do, after the deadline, they have much improved forward depth. There's so much to like about Minnesota. If they had one high-end center,
Well,
just one high-end center,
I
I
think,
would be a much bigger believer in their ability to win this series. And instead, I just think that Dallas's star power is just not, no pun intended, but their star power just does it for them.
I don't think the predictions are going to be very kind to Minnesota. I will put it that way. And we all believe it's going to be a series, but no one is picking Minnesota to win this thing. And I think a significant portion of that is the Eriksson Ek injury.
It's a huge thing for me, for sure.
With Eriksson Ek, I think it's more of a coin flip series. Could go either way. But as it stands, it's just with the lack of offensive ability that Minnesota has, I'm not betting against Jake Oettinger.
I think this is going to be a slug it out series, though. Like I think this is going to be pretty brutal games.
I think this is going to be a throwback postseason series. These are two teams that are going to get their hate on real fast, and they're going to hit each other, and they're going to hit each other a lot, and they're going to keep hitting each other. And they're just going to beat the other team up and get them nice and good and prepped for Colorado for round 2.
I hope it goes 7 games. For that reason, I think that the way these teams like to play, they're going to beat up on each other. And the reason I favor Dallas, we've talked about a lot of the reasons, but I think the age of Gustafsson being so young, green, a little bit untested, poses some concern for me. And then everything else that Dallas brings to the table is just pretty strong.
Yep. You don't sit at the top of a division all year and be a bad team.
There's two good hockey teams that just have to go to war now.
Let that be their problem.
Yep.
And,
Should have won the division.
Maybe the Avs can reap the benefits. We're going to wrap this one up for you, but plenty more division previews coming your way. Be sure to check them all out here on the DNVR YouTube. Like, subscribe, and go watch the next one.